HarperCollins presents Child of the Phoenix by Barbara Erskine, read by Ffion Aynsley. Prologue. Llanfaes, Anglesey, 1218. The full moon sailed high and cold above the streaming clouds, aloof from the rising tide and the white-whipped waves. At the door of the hall, a woman stared out across the water towards the glittering snows which mantled the peaks of Yr Wyddfa. Near her, a man stood waiting in the shadows, silent, still, his hands clasped on his staff. Eynion Gwledydd was tall, white-haired, austere in his patience. Soon the child would be born, the child whose destiny he had foretold, the child whose hands would hold 3 crowns, the child he would claim for the ancient gods of Albion. He smiled. The English wife had been in labour for 3 long days, and soon she would die. Behind the woman, in the hall, the fire had been banked up against the cold. A dozen anxious attendants crowded around the bed with its heaps of fur covers where their princess lay, too tired now even to cry out as the pains tore again and again at her frail body. The men of the Llys had gone, sent out to allow women's work to be done. Bronwen turned from the door at last and went to stand before the fire. She watched it hiss and spit, contained in its pit in the centre of the hall, the smoke spiralling up towards the hole in the smoky roof beams, which led it out and up towards the wind-blown clouds. Dawn was near. Behind her, Princess Joan screamed. Bronwen stooped, and picking up a handful of oak twigs, she threw them into the flames, where they flared blue and green, salted by the wind off the sea, which tortured and twisted every tree on the island's edge. She watched them for a while, then she turned and went towards the bed. Behind her, a spark flew outward and lodged amongst the dampened rushes which carpeted the floor. It hissed a moment, as if undecided whether to die or burn, then caught a frond of greenery and ran crackling along it to the next. By the bed, the women tended their exhausted princess and the tiny girl her body had spewed onto the sheets. In the hall, already wreathed with smoke, they did not smell the extra bitterness. The fire ran on across the floor away from them and leaped towards the wooden walls with their embroidered hangings. The rustle of flame turned to a hiss and then a roar. When the women heard it and turned, it had already taken hold, devouring the wall, leaping towards the roof beams, racing back across the floor towards them. One of them ran to ring a tocsin to summon the men, but they would be too late to save the hall. The others bundled the unconscious princess into her bedding and carried her as fast as they could towards the door. Outside, Eynion frowned. It seemed the princess would live, yet it was foretold that she would die. Bronwen was to be the child's nurse. She stood for a moment looking down at the baby crying on its sheepskin blanket. So little a mite, the last daughter of the Prince of Aberfraw, the granddaughter of John Plantagenet, King of England. A burning beam crashed across the floor near the bed. Bronwen smiled. The fire was a sign. Bride, Lady of the Moon, was a goddess of fire. This child was thrice blessed and touched by destiny. She would inherit Bride's special care. Stooping, she gathered the baby into her arms, then she turned and rang amongst a shower of falling timbers for the door. As the wind sucked the flames higher, Eynion Gwledydd raised his face to the east and his eyes widened in shock. The heavens, too, were aflame. The racing clouds flared orange and crimson and gold. Where the wind had whipped the waves into towering castles, they were purple and scarlet and gilded with sparks. The howl of the wind and water mingled with the greedy roar of the fire and the crash of thunder overhead. Before his awed gaze, the clouds ran together and coalesced, their borders streaming flame as they reared up overhead. He saw the form of a great bird slowly spreading across the sky, its wings outstretched from the fire-tipped peaks of Eryri to the gold of the western sea. The sun eagle. Eryr Eiraid. No, not an eagle, a phoenix. His lips framed the words soundlessly. The bird of fire on its pyre as
Sample complete. Ready to continue?